Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith. Hey everybody, and welcome to Commercial Drones FM. Ian here, and I'm recording at Exponential in Denver, Colorado, and sitting down with Ken Faulk, the founder and CEO of Scopito, an aerial inspection software company out of Denmark. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Thanks so much, Ian.
Thank you for being here. So we know each other. We've met before. We've hung out in Berlin and Germany at Intergeo and also in San Francisco at Drone Deploy Day.
Yep.
But tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, who is Ken Faulk?
Well, I have a background as an engineer, and I think I've always had fun dismantling stuff from when I was a kid. I remember one of my first projects was an old vintage car, and I basically took all the bolts out of that car. The car, the frame, the engine, everything was torn apart, basically to learn how things are.
Oh, interesting. So you're just curious by nature.
I think so.
Nice. And so where did what's the kind of inspiration behind Scopito? I mean, why did you create the company?
I think that I actually created it because I was working at a mid-sized company in Denmark, and we were actually working quite a lot. And I think there was a culture that, well, sometimes in larger companies, stuff doesn't necessarily get communicated the right way. So when you're further down, then sometimes things doesn't always make sense. And, I'm
it's a nice way to put it.
No, I'm sure they make a lot of sense for top management, but I think it's so important to get that communicated so that everybody really feels that they're working towards something and basically having fun while going to work. And
so you wanted to create a company where you were having more fun then?
Yeah. Basically.
And so Scopito came about. So why? So Scopito is a software company. It specializes in inspections from drones, or maybe just aerial inspections, the data from it. Why did you go the route of drones then? Why did you go for or inspection rather than, social media company or something like that, social networking?
Yeah, well, I think drones really fascinated me. And actually, when we started the company, we also focused on doing visual inspections of power lines. And that sort of brought us to a place where we quite quickly realized that managing this amount of data would be a really big problem in the future. And I think that's how we came about to actually focus on the software part of things.
And so you guys were doing them like on the ground, just humans looking with your eyeballs or binoculars or something?
No, we were flying drones at the beginning. We specialized in power line inspections, and that's basically all we did. We kept a very narrow focus. And that's about 4 years ago, before people really started gathering a lot of data.
Okay, so you were just taking pictures and then you were delivering all these images, and it was kind of a mess, right?
Exactly.
How do you provide value that way?
Yeah, we were delivering, it was small inspections of 5,000-10,000 images. And, the customer was sitting in Windows Picture Viewer with 10,000 images, and it was just a huge mess. So we realized, well, something has to happen here.
So what happened then? So you created Scopito, or you pivoted, I guess, to creating software. Obviously, this allows you to scale. I'm imagining you were doing most of your inspections anyways in Denmark.
Yeah.
And so with the software, can you kind of describe like the workflow or the user interface? Like how could a utility company or someone, maybe a service provider, use this to actually give value for the inspection from the drone? Like what does it do differently? What makes it special?
So I think we try to keep a quite narrow focus on what we call visual inspection. So we actually don't do any mapping and we don't do any 3D, but we are very focused on the inspection workflow. And that's basically going from 10,000 images of unstructured data to a nicely structured report telling you where you need to take action.
And so, yeah, there's from my perspective, there's this, geospatial layer. So you kind of see where every image was taken. You can scroll through them. You can add annotations on the images. Can you do measurements on the images? I guess you need some type of scale for that.
Yeah, we don't do it currently, but we're actually talking to some partners where, if we have data about the exact distance from the camera sensor to the object, then we can start to put measurements in these things as well.
Very cool. Yeah, and so you mentioned right now it's focused on 2D. Do you imagine yourselves going into more of the 3D, maybe even with other types of data, like potentially LiDAR data, because there's just like these super dense point clouds?
Yeah. Well, I think at the moment, it's not our focus. I think, 3D has a lot of really cool usages, LiDAR, vegetation management, referencing stuff. But for our inspection workflow, it's not super valuable at the moment. I imagine that we'll get that at some point or make integrations to other softwares that has these capabilities. But right now, you basically need to go through a huge pile of 2D images and figure out where you have faults.
But your software makes it much, much easier. I want to take this moment actually to talk about, so sometimes I'll talk to companies, and big companies, like I'm talking like Fortune 500 companies, people in part of, in charge of the drone program. And their first thought is that they can use, or they want to use, photogrammetry to do this inspection. And in reality, it's actually an absolutely terrible thing to apply for these inspections, which is why you guys use the raw images, correct? Like the straight from the drone, like super high resolution, you can zoom in. But yeah, I just wanted to make that known, is that, photogrammetry is great at, it's not great at modeling really high resolution vertical infrastructure like a power line with very thin features and lattice work and things like this. So yeah, the best approach right now is 2D imagery. Is video ever useful? Have you found any clients that needed video or anything of their assets?
Well, I think a lot of clients talk about videos, but in real use cases, we see it quite seldomly, again, because the quality is not that high. Full HD, it's a 2 megapixel image, and we're usually talking 24 to 100 megapixel images.
Yeah, so that's much more data you can get there. It's also stuck in time. It's a perfect thing to reference. So you were telling me earlier about an integration you guys have made with an AI product. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think you're referencing IBM Watson.
Yes, that's correct. I didn't want to spill the beans. Give that honor to you. Yeah,
well, basically, we're working with a Danish company who has a lot of data, and they're working with IBM, and they've trained their own model, their proprietary model. And we know a lot of infrastructure companies who are using IBM products and are training models. So this client basically wanted to use that IBM model and apply that to the data in Scopito. So
what is IBM Watson? Can you give us a little rundown of, like, I think people have heard of it, like it's beaten master chess players before or something, but like how is it used in Scopito context?
So I think it's a quite large term for a lot of AI stuff. In our case, it's the visual recognition engine. So it's basically the capability to go through an image and detect certain kind of objects in that image.
And so that is because when you're delivering thousands of images, you don't want to have to look at every single image as a human. It's very time consuming, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's really interesting, and I was really happy to hear that you guys integrated with them. There's another integration that you guys have that I know about very well, and so this is how we know each other for the audience listening. So you guys have a drone deploy integration.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? And as I previously mentioned, photogrammetry not the best for vertical asset infrastructure inspection. So what does your drone deploy integration do? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I think, it makes perfect sense, the integration we made, because drone deploy, you guys are focusing on the mapping or stitching images and generating the 3D model, which is basically what we don't do very well. But we focus very much on the visual inspections, the vertical inspections, which you don't focus that much on. So basically, this integration brings the best of both worlds. You can generate a map which gives you an overview, and if you have your precise inspection data, you can analyze that in Scopito, and you can actually use the map you've generated in Drone Deploy as an overview map in Scopito as well.
Yeah, and so you're bringing the raw images again over into the platform geotag, but also those map tiles or the orthomosaic layer to get like a really up-to-date overview rather than relying on like the satellite imagery of whoever provides your base layer maps.
Yeah, exactly. And we see that a lot with solar farms and places where you have new infrastructure. There is basically nothing on Google satellite imagery. And in that case, it's awesome to have the maps generated by Drone Deploy.
This episode of Commercial Drones FM is brought to you by FLIR. Pretty much everyone in the commercial drone world knows about FLIR's thermal imaging technologies and may even have a basic understanding of how their sensors work. At Commercial Drones FM, we think this technology is deserving of the spotlight to reveal some of the incredible things thermal imaging drones can accomplish. Drones equipped with thermal imagers offer a way to see the world from a different perspective, which can help identify infrastructure problems, locate missing people, and increase safety and efficiency across a variety of industries. The value of thermal imaging for commercial drone operations is undeniable. So I want to use this podcast as a platform to dive deep into the world of heat and seek out the best practices and the unique use cases that make thermal imaging sensors the most drone-ready payload for commercial drone applications right next to RGB cameras. So join us over the coming months as we invite FLIR and their customers into our studio to discuss the technical and practical uses of their groundbreaking efforts in aerial thermal imagery. This episode of Commercial Drones FM is brought to you by Deveron UAS. Deveron UAS offers enterprise drone services for farmland across North America. I recently spoke with Bonduelle, one of Deveron's largest customers.
So my name is Jennifer Thompson. I work for Bonduelle America's Long Life. We're a vegetable processor. Bonduelle is a very large company with 54 plants in the world. Here in North America, we have 11 plants doing frozen and canned vegetables.
So naturally, I wanted to know, how is Deveron helping one of the largest vegetable processors in the world by using drone technology?
So we use Deveron to service and support our precision agricultural needs. For us, it's not easy to have our own or fly our own drones to gather crop data. So Deveron is ready and available to work for us when needed. We fly thousands of acres, and managing those acres, it just works very easily with them in our fast-paced growing season. They're not just providing data, they're helping to solve issues and find solutions.
Well, that's very important work, but what's your favorite crop to eat?
My favorite crop to eat is sweet corn. I will eat sweet corn 365 days of the year.
I'm not sure if I've ever eaten sweet corn yet that was monitored by drone. To learn more, visit deveronuas.com/dronesfm and see for yourself how Deveron is leading collaboration in agriculture with drones. That's deveronuas.com/dronesfm. Okay, back to the show. So you guys are taking all this data and ingesting it, and we were chatting just briefly about this, like stepping back again and kind of talking a little bit more about the AI. You're asking me if I knew anybody that, was any company that was really doing automated asset inspection, computer vision, machine learning, automated detection of damage very well. And one of the, I was like racking my brain, scratching my head, and I couldn't think of that many companies. And you were explaining, and I asked you, why is that? Like, what's the deal? And so why is that? What's the deal? Tell us what you told me.
Well, I think, the technology is mature, and a lot of companies are working on this very hard. And I think one of the problems is that I don't think we're there today. I think if you go to websites, you'll actually find a lot of websites where you can find this stuff, but very few have a working product. A lot of companies have concepts and they're pretty far, but I think we're still lacking enough data of the actual faults. So we can have thousands or hundred thousands of images of insulators or different kind of components, but we don't have 10,000 images of lightning strikes on a power line.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not happening so often, or we just don't have and I'm using we as like the royal we, like everybody don't have enough. You have to get training data, like data sets for training to automate that. So it's actually, an interesting conundrum that I wasn't even thinking about is you have to capture, probably with a drone, all the data manually first, through X number of inspections, could be hundreds or something, and then throw them through an algorithm like a product like IBM's Watson or something similar, and then be able to get those kind of custom algorithms that'll tell you if there's a lightning strike or maybe rust or a loose bolt or something. Well, that's a really interesting problem. I think we're getting closer and closer to that though as an industry. Yeah. Can you share any use cases of customers that use Scopito for inspection and on their assets, and kind of break it down on their entire workflow and maybe how they're getting a positive return on investment out of it?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm allowed to share a case from Denmark. Energinet, the company is called, and it's basically the only transmission line company in Denmark. It's government owned, and it owns all the transmission lines above 60,000 volts.
Energinet, how do you spell that?
ENRIGINET.
Oh my, okay.
DK.
You totally lost me at the NRI, but awesome. Okay.
Yeah, but basically, they hired drones to inspect river crossing, which was hard to access because they were doing some maintenance on it. They actually had done some maintenance and wanted to check up on those. And the first inspection was basically to check up on the faults, and they figured out they had a lot of other issues, a lot of rust, corrosion on the insulators.
Oh, interesting. So this was like a power line that was kind of going over, over a river?
Like,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And they had just been out there repairing stuff 1 month earlier. And, by combining that into one inspection, they would have saved, I think it was about $15,000 just in equipment and shutting down the power.
Wow.
But I think the interesting part is that we're seeing, by employing drones, you typically have direct cost savings compared to if you have to rent a mast or have people climb it. But the largest cost savings is actually having the data available and use that in your planning process. So in this case, they went out there 2 times. They could have done it once, but actually when they needed to change the insulators, they weren't sure what kind of tools they needed because it's a lot of different equipment. And they said, well, usually they have to climb the pylon again. So just by having the photos, they didn't need to do that. And then a funny story is that, they couldn't find the tools that they needed to change these insulators. And they brought up the images again, and they had actually left them in the pylon from the last time they were there.
Wait, so the tools were sitting there in the imagery, the same tools that they needed to fix
exactly.
it?
Exactly. And we can't make up these stories. And it's also difficult for customers to understand the real benefit from having the data, not just the direct cost saving of using the drone, but what happens when you have this data available and you have it available over time, so you can start to do predictive stuff as well.
That's really interesting. Yeah, the indirect value that you get from it that you can't really attribute an ROI to for getting these proprietary tools up on the pylon.
Yeah, and you can do it, but you can do it in hindsight because we could never tell this company, well, by doing this, you would be able to save 3 times going into this pylon.
That's a great case study though.
Yeah, and actually the same place as well. They found some weird, almost like sandblasted surface on the wires, and they said usually they actually hire a guy from Canada to fly in, climb up, and evaluate this stuff.
Canada all the way to Denmark.
Yeah. Wow. And in this case, they had such high-resolution imagery, they could just send him a login to Scopito, and he could just sit at a remote location.
That's super interesting.
And, it's stuff like that really brings value, but it's difficult when you don't have this data available to really imagine what you can do with it.
Yeah. No, that's I think that's going towards imagine when the drone flies itself. And, there was a podcast I did with Biren Gandhi of Cisco. Cisco creates WebEx, I think it's called, the web conferencing thing.
Yeah.
Like you could integrate that into a drone and then have the guy in Canada there with a drone while the drone's even flying, maybe. And then he's alerted, he can log in and then see the damage or something and advise. Or it could be done probably by even more AI as we progress in the future. So that's really cool. Speaking of the future, what does the future have in store for Scopito? I mean, what are your plans? You guys are, how many employees are you guys in Denmark? Pretty small team?
Yeah, pretty small still. We're 4 full-time employees and 3 part-time.
Nice. And are you going to be expanding anywhere? I mean, any growth plans here? Since your software has been so valuable, you're getting lots of adoption. At least what I see through the app market on Drone Deploy. Yeah,
definitely. I think we're seeing good traction, and also especially in the US, I think we're getting 60% of new customers from the US currently. So that's extremely interesting for us. So basically, our plan is to expand in the US, establish ourselves there, and possibly also look for investors in the US.
Oh, excellent. Cool. So even more growth to come. And it's such a universal, I mean, every country has utility companies. I mean, they're everywhere. There's power lines everywhere. They're so integral to the backbone of like modern society that I don't think you guys are going to have many issues with finding a market fit in different areas of the world.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is, drones create a bigger problem because you get more data. But if you take like Energinet, they also use Scopito now for all the helicopter inspection or ground-based inspections, because it's basically imagery. If it's from a drone or helicopter or subsea level, it doesn't really matter. It's the same workflow we're helping people solve.
Yeah, and so I guess as long as it has metadata on it, GPS tags or something, you can actually, make a lot more use out of that. And through the integrations, I'm imagining more integrations from you guys too. Not just Drone Deploy and IBM Watson, but other kind of machine learning AI companies as well.
Yeah, definitely. We really want to work with other AI companies. It's our strategy not to develop these algorithms ourselves, but basically collaborate with other people or other companies that are really great at that part, and we're good at visualizing things. So yeah, if anyone's out there, we really want to talk.
There you go. There's the challenge. If you're listening to this has happened before. I do get emails sometimes. People are like, actually, we exist. So yes, if you do that stuff, get in contact with me or reach out to Ken, and hopefully you guys can work together. So thank you so much, Ken, for being here on the podcast and sharing. What are you looking forward to at Exponential? You guys have a booth, right?
Yeah, okay. It's actually our first exhibition stand in the US. So yeah, we really look forward to that. And, we've talked to a lot of our current clients coming by, and just meeting a lot of people in person that we just talked to over Skype or on email.
Excellent. Yeah, it's exciting. Welcome back to the US.
Yeah.
Cool. So if you want to learn more about Scopito and you're listening, you can head to scopito.com. Check out their website, check out their software. They've got some probably some demos and things on there that you can check out. And if you're wanting to, while you're at it, you can check out the podcast's website at commercialdrones.fm, or follow us on Twitter at dronespodcast or facebook.com/dronespodcast. And that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else to say, Ken.
Cool. Well, it's a pleasure as always.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. Looking forward to hang out with you guys this week. Thanks everybody for listening. We are going to cut off the mics. Cheers.